Well, good morning and welcome to Thursday. Here we are, 2 more days left in the traditional work week, heading towards the weekend, and we have made it to our 4th day in the 8th chapter of the book of Hebrews. Meditations in Hebrews, that's what we're doing. We're gleaning, finding something to munch on. This book is chock full of not just information, but earth-shattering revelation that challenges the religious notions of our day as well as previous days. And we need some shaking up. In fact, we're going to discover a message in the book of Hebrews, one which I began to preach at the beginning of 2020. I felt the Lord was talking to me about a whole lot of shaking was coming. And we are still going through a whole lot of shaking going on. That was based upon a part of Hebrews that talks about, and that which can be shaken will be shaken, so that which is eternal may remain. The people of Israel had gone through a shaking, and we're going through a shaking. The Hebrew believers were feeling that tectonic shift. They were feeling a major shift that was shaking their whole world. And that was this great revelation of the great high priest. And in order for this great high priesthood to come into place, in order for salvation to be fully revealed, it was going to mean the displacing of some 1,000-year traditions and longer. Talk about a major shaking. Great news, though. It's for something better. Let's see then in Hebrews chapter 8, verses 7 and 8. And it reads this way: For if there had been nothing wrong with that first covenant, no place would have been sought for another. So just in general terms, if a person has negotiated a work contract, if they have worked a sports contract, if they have entered into an agreement for business, if you've entered into an agreement as an employee, then you see that sometimes life changes, things change in the situation. And one thing that is sure about God is God, with Him there's no variableness or shadow of turning. And so it's not on His behalf that this happens, but on the human behalf, there is fluidity, there is change. That one thing that is certain is that there will be change. It's kind of one of those strange statements. For if there had been nothing wrong with the first covenant, no place would have been sought for another. Which covenant are we talking about? We're talking about the covenant entered into at Sinai. And it features the ongoing sacrifice of animals under the Mosaic law. When you read the book of Genesis, you catch a sight of them certainly building altars, worshiping the Lord and making sacrifice. That evidently began right at the altar outside the garden. Cain and Abel are well acquainted with it. You come to Noah, then you move down through Noah to his descendants, and here we find Abraham, and then Isaac, and then Jacob, and then when they leave Egypt, we find that it is codified. It's put into consistency. It's assigned to the tribe of Levi. And as they're growing and growing into the multiple millions, this goes on. Then it goes on for hundreds of years. But this is earth-shattering. The book of Hebrews tells us, if there had been nothing wrong with that first covenant, no place would have been sought for another. What could have been wrong with the covenant? God was in the middle of that covenant. He revealed by the hand of angels the terms of that covenant. But, it says, God found fault with the people. Imagine that. Finding fault with people. Fallen, broken, self-serving, narcissistic, narrow-minded, and ignorant creatures. Imagine finding fault with a covenant. Now, we know amongst ourselves as human beings that we can find a fault with a covenant. At first, we don't see it. But the experiences of the terms of that covenant begins to show up the problems. And then you always have renegotiation of contracts. Actors and actresses do it. Sports figures do it. Employees do it with their bosses. There's some form of contract that they renegotiate, some terms, what they share as far as profit, what the quantity of salary that they're paid, what kind of expenses are covered. All of these things are open to renegotiation. But we're talking here about the terms of approach to God and the terms of assurance of forgiveness from sin, all kinds of things that are absolutely vitally and eternally important. But God found fault with the people and said, "The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant." I will make a new covenant. This is earth-shattering news. When God was speaking into the lives of the people of Israel through the prophet Jeremiah, what was the context? The southern kingdom was going into exile. The northern kingdom had already been dispersed into exile. And now, here is the southern kingdom. It has not learned its lesson. It has watched the northern kingdom fall into idolatry and then be taken into exile by the Assyrians. Now they have fallen into gross and terrible and horrible idolatry. What were they doing? They were offering their children to Molech, one of the Baals, one of the Baals. They had erected an altar to Molech near the garden, or near the valley of Gehinnom, near the valley of Gehenna, up on the heights on the opposite side from the city of David. And people were going there and offering their children. What if you just Google Molech and look archaeologically into the rituals? It's horrifying. The people of Israel fell into gross sin and idolatry and rejected their covenant with God and rejected God. So, would God find fault with the people? Yes. What are your options? Well, guys, I guess you just can't do it. Forget it. I guess I'll turn my back on you forever. No. What does he do? He brings up a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. I will make a new covenant with them. Now, isn't that interesting that he finds fault, then develops a new covenant? Rather than, it doesn't read this way, he found fault, and then a great fire from the Lord poured forth, and they were all destroyed. No, that's not what it says. It says that he's going to make a new covenant. So he's declaring this in the days of the coming exile of the southern kingdom, Judah, when the northern kingdom has already utterly abandoned him and been taken into exile. They've been spit out of the land, and now the southern kingdom is on the verge of being spit out of the land. And Jeremiah is telling them, he's warning them, he's speaking on behalf of God. And he says, the days are coming when I will make a new covenant. Why? Because these people, they just can't do it. They just can't keep up their end of the bargain. You ever felt that way? You just can't come through. You just can't stop yourself from failing. you just can't get the deal done. Very frustrating. And at that point, we often want to give up. But we need to hear a word of encouragement ringing out of the prophet Jeremiah, out of the 31st chapter of the book of Jeremiah. In fact, this is beginning to quote that 31st chapter, verses 31 through 34, I believe. That there is a new covenant. I like things that are new. I like things that are renewed. And that tells us something. Out of this verse, God loves to make new and renew. He knows our flaws, our failures, our hang-ups, our brokenness, our woundedness, our insufficiency. And his objective is not to utterly destroy us. His objective is to reconcile us. And the way you do that is with a new covenant. So, let that kind of ring in your spirit today, the idea of a new covenant that has come already, past tense for us. But for those that were the objects of the word in Jeremiah 31, it was out in the future. Something to give them hope, to move them into the future. So let that ring in your heart today as a sense of hope. And the Lord bless you. Have a great day. Grace and peace upon you. We'll see you on Friday.